So everybody, I'm so glad to see all of you back here again. I hope that since our last retreat, all of you have been trying to put into practice all the tricks that I've shared with you regarding the application of open awareness. As I often say, open awareness is not confined to formal sitting or walking, and it can be applied in as many aspects of your daily life as possible. It really depends on whether you remember to do so and whether you have the right effort and right view to continue the practice effectively. Today I'm going to talk about whether open awareness practice has any basis in the suttas, because sometimes people ask me whether open awareness can be found in the suttas, basically because people are more familiar with focused awareness, where they just direct your attention to one single object. For example, watching your breath, whether at the nostrils or at the abdomen, or radiating loving kindness to a particular being or to all beings. In the other traditions, in the Thai forest traditions, you have the repetition of Buddho Buddho when you try to watch the breath. You also have a similar approach in some methods that can be found in Burma. And in the Mahayana tradition, we have this very popular practice of just reciting Namo Amitofo throughout your daily activities. All these are different types of focused awareness practice where you just pay attention to one single thing. In my retreats, I also teach you to chant the Sukhino, metta chant, and at the same time try to evoke a sense of loving kindness. In my longer retreats, I also introduce another one, which is Arahang Sammasambuddho. So these are focused awareness practice that leads to some sort of serenity, calmness, tranquility of the mind. So sometimes people have some doubts about this. They seem to think that open awareness is something new, something very fashionable in our contemporary revival of Buddhist meditation. So today I'm going to show you that actually the concept of open awareness can be found in the suttas, although the actual word, the actual term, open awareness is not used. The most prominent aspect of open awareness can be found in one element of the gradual training template. The gradual training template is a sort of a default instruction that the Buddha would give to his monks and nuns. And of course, you could also customize it according to the needs, spiritual maturity, and inclinations of the listener, the one he's instructing, or the people he's instructing. I made a very thorough study of this gradual training that can be found in the suttas, particularly in Digha Nikaya, the Majjhima Nikaya, and a little bit of it in the Sutta Nipata of the Khuddaka Nikaya. I don't think you can read that. I'm not asking you to go through this study. I'm just showing you what I did. What I've done is I have listed out the elements found in the gradual training. But this gradual training that can be found in Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha, Majjhima Nikaya, the middle-length discourses of the Buddha, and in one sutta, in the Sutta Nipata, are not all always the same. There are variations involved. So what I've done on this first column is to compile all the elements that can be found in the different variations of the gradual training into a composite list. And then the next column shows the elements that can be found. You can see the numbering on the first column. The numbering on the first column is just to list the number of elements. But the numbers that can be found in the second column refer to the order in which these elements are found in that particular sutta. Alright, sometimes it's the same order, sometimes it's not. Right? For example, you can see in Majjhima Nikaya 27, instead of starting with shame and fear of wrongdoing, it goes straight to the appearance of the Buddha and the Buddha preaching the Dhamma. Right? You see, that's why it starts with number 1 there, and it goes on until the bottom. For other suttas, for example, in MN 53, you'll see that it starts from restraint according to the Patimokkha as number 1. So the first few elements, 1, 2, 3, the first 4 elements are not found there. Alright, so you can see that the numbering is different. For the first column, it's just to show you the total number of elements that can be found in all the variations of the gradual training. Whereas in the second column, it shows you only the elements that can be found in that particular sutta and the order of the elements, which may not be the same as what is found in the first list. And then the second is the Digha Nikaya. And then finally, I have compiled the total occurrences of these different elements. Alright, so you can see here the numbers of MN and DN shows you the total number of occurrences of that particular element that can be found across all the different suttas which give different variations of the gradual training. And when you look at this, right, we find that restraint of the senses is the one that occurs most often. It's got a total of 18 occurrences in the 2 Nikayas. This is followed by the next 3, which are mindfulness and full awareness, or mindfulness and clear awareness, and then going to a secluded place and abandoning of the hindrances. This is just the next 3 items below restraint of the senses. And then finally, we have one more, which is below that, which is also the same. In fact, all these 4 are in a tie because all of them have got 17 occurrences, whereas sense restraint has got 18. So the last one is the jhana, attainment of the jhanas. So what I want to point out here is that open awareness is actually related to sense restraint. The concept of open awareness is really been dealt with in this element of sense restraint. And what I'm going to show you in the next slide is from the Ganaka Moggallana Sutta, MN 107, which is one particular variation of the gradual training. There, sense restraint is step number 2. The first step in this Ganaka Moggallana Sutta is morality. A monk is supposed to be restrained according to the Patimokkha, and then he should be afraid of even the slightest wrongdoing, of the slightest faults. Besides the gradual training, instructions for sense restraint can be found scattered throughout the suttas. They may not be part of the gradual training, but instructions for sense restraint have a very standard format. And there are many of these to be found in the Samyutta Nikaya, the connected discourses of the Buddha. And basically, it is simply this: having perceived anything through the senses, whether it's your eyes or ears or nose or tongue or your touch, your body, or whether it's your mind, with any of these things, then one should not grasp at the signs or features. Otherwise, if one were to grasp at the signs and features, then this person would be flooded or could be flooded by evil, unwholesome states of longing and dejection. These are technical terms, longing and dejection, but if we want to use more colloquial language, that means likes and dislikes. So you see here that when you talk about restraint of the senses, are you restraining the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, or the mind? It doesn't seem to be so, There is another aspect of the mind, which is grasping at the signs and the features. The eyes only see an object, only see colors. The eyes cannot grasp. So too for the other four senses. It's very obvious. The ears, the nose, the tongue, the body. These five senses can only be conscious of its specific sense object. It doesn't have any choice. If the object is there, your organ is in good order, and the object is very prominent, then there will be the respective sense consciousness arising, being conscious of that object. So it seems that the mind is also there. Objects in the mind just arise. So there's one aspect of the mind in which there's no control. And this is very obvious. For example, when you are practicing open awareness, you're trying to be aware of the senses, and then suddenly you'll be assailed by memories of the past, or memories sometimes triggered by what you perceive in the present, and sometimes they are not triggered. They just arise out of the blue. There's no control over these memories. But if after a memory has arisen, then if it's an unpleasant memory, you try to push it away. Then you are already flooded by dislike. Why are you flooded by dislike? Because you grasp at the signs and features. Grasping at the signs and features means looking into the details of what is happening in the mind, in that memory, and then holding onto it rather than just letting go. Alright, so although the Buddha gives these instructions, we could say very detailed. Whatever you perceive with the six senses, you should not grasp at the signs and features. But then he never told us in any of these detailed descriptions of sense restraint how not to grasp at the signs and features. He has told us not to grasp at the signs and features, otherwise you would be flooded or overwhelmed by likes and dislikes. Right? But he didn't tell us how to do so. But I've told you how to do so. I've told you that if you apply this principle of other anchor, then you will not grasp at the signs and features. Okay? Now this other anchor can be used for either focused awareness practice or open awareness practice. Let's start off with focused awareness practice, which will lead to what I call static serenity. First of all, the A stands for accept all things. Right? You're very familiar with this. I've already covered this in my talks during the retreats. You accept the fact that whatever happens is a product of causes and conditions. Only with this attitude will you be able to not reject or follow whatever that arises in your mind in the course of your focused awareness practice. For example, doing anapanasati, or when you are reciting Sukhino Wakemi no Hontu, you will be interrupted very often by memories, by thoughts, by comments, by judgments, by intentions. These things will come and go. But if you have this correct attitude, that all these things arise due to causes and conditions, which you may not be able to see yet, but you accept this on good faith. So, with this sort of attitude, you can practice this D. You don't reject or you don't follow. You just abandon it. You just put it aside, and then you come back to your breath. You come back to your Sukhino chanting or your Arahant chanting. So, this is focused awareness, because you're focusing on one thing and you're disregarding everything else that distracts your attention from that one thing you are focusing. This will lead to static serenity, in the sense that your serenity is attained through your static focus on a single object of meditation. Then I also shared with you that in the practice of open awareness too, you apply this same principle of other anchor with a little bit of modification. So for the D, instead of just don't reject or don't follow, you also don't ignore it. Now, if you want to ignore it, also can. If you ignore it and then you abandon it and then come back to the five senses, this will also give you serenity. Yeah, because you're not caught up in your thoughts, your memories. So if you're not caught up in them, there's peace of mind, nothing to think about. It's all empty, just the five senses. But this is also called dynamic serenity, because you are being aware of many things happening and you are not perturbed, you are not disturbed by any of them. However, if you want to practice open awareness as a foundation for insight or Vipassanā, then you introduce an extra element in the second step, the D, which is we don't ignore it. You know what it is, all right? You acknowledge it. Which for the A, you acknowledge it, and then you let it go by anchoring the mind to the five senses. Okay? I've already shown you the 561 principle, which I will talk about later again, because there is a sutta that also implies that this is applicable in the practice of Vipassanā. So, open awareness at its initial stage is just serenity practice. Now, you might ask, what's the difference between acknowledging it and grasping at the sign? Right? That's why here I teach you touch and go, hit and run. Yeah? You don't hold on to the objects. Once you know, then you go. So that's the difference. And what's the difference between rejecting and letting go? Rejecting is that there is a sort of a dislike. Letting go, there's no dislike. It's just disengaging the mind from there, changing subject to be aware of the five senses. That's the difference. If you find that there is some resistance or dislike, then that is rejecting. If you just touch and go, hit and run, that's not rejecting.